David Blood, right?
Like, really, he shouldn't. So there will be no excuse for that.
Here he is.
Okay,
There he is, just on time.
David, hi. Okay, we're live, so I'm going to start this session. Thank you. Good afternoon and good morning for those that are joining us from overseas, and welcome to the Unify Global Roundtable. Welcome to this session titled A Legal Framework for Impact, Investing for Sustainability Impact. This session follows David Blood's keynote from a few seconds ago. What we will discuss here relates to creating a shift in the investment industry towards assessing and accounting for sustainability impact. We will discuss what that means and the extent to which legal frameworks enables investors to do so. It is the subject of a forthcoming report from the law firm Freshfields, commissioned by PRI and us, Unify. We expect this report will contribute rigorous legal analysis to emerging practice, as well as recommendations for policy, regulatory, and legal reform where deemed necessary to accompany investors' climate and sustainability action. To further discuss, I'm joined by our panel of experts, Margaret Wachenfeld. Margaret is Managing Director at Themis Research, an independent research consultancy specializing in international law and policy in the areas of human rights, sustainable development, responsible business conduct. Margaret is also Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for Human Rights and Business. Thank you, Margaret. David Rauch, welcome, David, is partner at Freshfields Brockhaus Beringer and lead lawyer on the forthcoming report I just mentioned. He's also the author of the book, The Social License for Financial Markets, that was recently published in July, and that includes a foreword from Mark Carney. And also Tom Taylor is with us, who's a senior manager at the Aviva Investor Sustainable Finance Center for Excellence. His work focuses on market reform and sharing expertise and best practice on sustainable finance through the Aviva Investors ESG Academy. Before we start, and to the audience that is listening, please do use the chat function to ask questions. We will see your questions coming through, and I will come to your questions in the second phase. So to you first, David, with my first question goes to you. As lead lawyer on the upcoming research, can you tell us more about the work and what Freshfields is hoping to achieve with this report and this research?
Yeah, thank you, Elodie. So the project is essentially about investment goals. So let me make 3 points about that. What questions are we asking? What is our aim in asking them? And what's the process? And we can come on a little bit to what we're finding out a bit later on. The question we're asking is essentially this. As a legal matter, can investors actively seek to achieve any goal other than generating an appropriate financial return for their beneficiaries? And in particular, can they seek to achieve sustainability goals in the way that they manage their portfolios, as well as achieving financial goals? In other words, taking the sustainability footprint of an investee enterprise, can an investor take active steps to help the enterprise to improve its sustainability footprint? Now, we've termed that sort of investing for sustainability impact. And we're using that concept of investing for sustainability impact as, if you like, a conceptual net to help us to identify across 11 key legal jurisdictions which laws allow for investors to do it and which laws prevent it. So that brings us on to the aim of the exercise. So the first aim of the exercise is to clarify just how much scope investors currently have intentionally to pursue sustainability goals as well as financial goals. And then the second aim is to identify ways in which the law could be changed to facilitate this. Now, as part of the process, we're also hoping to clarify how investing for sustainability impact is fundamentally different from most other forms of sustainable investment, as they are practiced today. Now, sustainable investment as it's practiced today is essentially about generating financial return as efficiently as possible, and in some cases doing that in ways that reflect the values of investors. But as I think you can see from what I've just been saying about how we've defined investing for sustainability impact, the contrast is that with investing for sustainability impact, the investor is actively seeking to foster an improved sustainability footprint on the part of investee enterprises. So, in other words, investors are intentionally addressing enterprise sustainability impact. So that's the questions we're asking, the aim. What about the process we're going through? Well, as I mentioned, we're looking at the law in across 11 jurisdictions. We're looking at it as it applies to three key asset owner categories that control the bulk of the world's investable assets: pension funds, insurers, and mutual funds. And we're looking at the way that the law applies to three sorts of investment activity: investment powers, in other words, the power to buy and sell investments, engagement and stewardship powers, and policy work. And we're also considering the flow through of the law as it applies to those asset owners through to investment managers. Now, you'll probably appreciate from that the exercise becomes pretty complex pretty fast, and we can come back to that in a moment. One of the major challenges I think we're dealing with is the way that existing investment practice is dominated by approaches to portfolio management that are essentially based on the historic price performance and volatility of investments in a given market, but don't really take much account of long-term sustainability factors and the way that those could impact medium-term financial performance. And I use the word medium-term rather than longer-term financial performance these days because it increasingly looks as if that's what we're talking about. In other words, investment practice seems to be dominated, at least in terms of portfolio construction, by models that tend to edit out consideration of sustainability impact. Now, I described it as investment practice. Why is that relevant if we're looking at legal rules? Well, there's an interplay between the two because the way legal rules work is very often informed by market practice. And if market practice is saying that you ought to be doing something in a particular way, then that influences the way that legal rules get construed as well.
Thank you, David. And indeed, in terms of market practice, I mean, there is a plethora of terms in the responsible investment industry, and here we come talking about investing for sustainability impact. So, can you help the audience with really grasping what it means in concrete process terms for Aviva to invest for sustainability impact?
Thank you, Elodie, and thank you for the opportunity to speak about this interesting project. I think, as David has outlined, there are a number of ways in which market practice is evolving, and I think impact is an idea, a concept that, as you alluded to, Elodie, there are so many different terms and different ways in which it's used. You know, we will often hear about impact investing, and this project is looking at something slightly different. Developing particularly out of the action plan that the European Commission have got is the idea of not only looking at the consideration of the impact that sustainability factors might have on the performance of an asset or an investment, but also starting to think about the impact that the investment itself has upon sustainability factors, this idea of double materiality. And I think the first point is recognizing that all investment decisions have an impact of some sort. And recognizing that and building that into the way that either as an asset owner like Aviva, you give mandates to your investment manager, or as an investment manager like Aviva Investors, you carry out those mandates. I think it's also important to think about investment decisions in a broad sense. And David again has alluded to the way that the work of the project has constructed itself around this. So it's not just about buy, sell, and hold, but you also make investment decisions when you choose whether or not to engage with a company, and if you are going to engage, on which topics. Or are you going to use your vote, and if so, how, if you have a vote in relation to an asset when it comes to a general meeting or a shareholder resolution. And finally, as investors, we can and should, in our view at Aviva, integrate consideration of sustainability issues into our investment decisions, to use stewardship. But also sometimes we come up against issues which can't be solved solely by integration and stewardship, bigger issues, market failures in economic language, that actually require the intervention of policymakers and regulators. And actually, thinking about sometimes the biggest impact that an investor or an asset owner can have is to actually engage with policymakers and alert them to the fact that there are bigger issues that require intervention in a regulatory sense to solve them. And thinking about how actually the good functioning and the integrity of the market, which is generally understood more in sort of financial crime and financial fair play terms, can actually be enhanced by investors calling out where the market isn't working perhaps as it should. In terms of how this works with concrete examples, one really good one comes out of the Net Zero Asset Owners Alliance, which has obviously made announcements today about commitment to decarbonisation pathways. And I think the detail that's starting to come out of that alliance now is a good example of the way that sustainability impact can be invested for, in that it's about first recognising that there is an impact, thinking about how that impact can be changed, whether that's through allocation of capital or engagement with companies. And it's notable that the alliance is talking about working with initiatives like Climate Action 100+ in terms of engagement with the highest emitters, and setting clear and measurable targets for what the impact is and what the goal, in this case over the initial 5 years of the project, is going to be. And I think setting those targets and setting frameworks and being clear about what you're going to do, so that those who are engaging with your products, who are the pension holder, the beneficiary, or the holder of a mutual fund, they know what they're going to get. They know how you're going to use the money that you're entrusted.
No, thank you. I think across the conference so far, we hear a lot of those initiatives, like the one you mentioned of the Asset Owner Alliance that is setting targets towards net zero. We also heard of progress from the banks that have signed up to the Principles for Responsible Banking and that are committed to achieving a positive impact of measuring and closing on their actual impact on societies and the environment. And so really here the point, if I understand, is get our heads around the legal framework and what can enable investors and support investors to do more of that, setting targets for biodiversity, for water, for ocean, and I think it is absolutely needed that we frame this right, so as to frame also investor leadership. Margaret, to you. How do you view the role of the investment industry, generally speaking, in terms of driving positive impacts in the real world, and what do you hope this work can achieve? What are your expectations?
Okay, thanks very much, Elodie, and thanks, Tom and David, for leading into that. I think, Elodie, since this is a report about the law, I'm going to start with the lawmakers on this issue. And I think I have 3 points for lawmakers and regulators in the financial sector. Courage, clarity, and coherence. So one is we're in the middle of an existential crisis. We don't have to go over that again. It's been repeated over and over again during the course of this discussion. And I think on the whole, from the civil society point of view, it looks like regulators are mostly missing in action. Now, there's some important exceptions, the EU being one, and there are a number of regulators, of course, who are participating here. But on the whole, I think it's quite regrettable that there hasn't been more action. And I think the report shows that to a certain extent, that there hasn't been more action by regulators. So what is it that we are looking for from regulators? We're looking for clarity on a number of points. I'm going to highlight 3. There could be many more. One is just the basic point that the Davids have made and Tom has made and you've made, right? This is about mainstream investing. We're not talking just about impact investing in this report. And I think, David, you've made that very clear, but I think it needs to be clear to the audience as well. I think the